Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Izuku had a bone manipulation quirk with one for all. Changes occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk. Before we start, thank you for the support in the last video. This really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to leave a like in this video, and you can suggest a My Hero Academia fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Chapter 9: Cavalry Charge. Midoriya Residence. Izuku just finished packing his gear for the sports festival as he made his way to the door. "Izuku, be careful not to get hurt," his mother called out from behind him. He turned and gave his mother a smile. "I'll do what I can," he replied with a grin. "I can't promise what I can't keep," he mentally added. Call it a gut feeling, but he can tell that he won't be able to finish the sports festival unscathed. Though it wasn't the answer the mother wanted, she gave him a smile. "I'll be sure to record it in high resolution," she stated in an excited voice. Izuku chuckled as he went to give his mother a hug. "Okay," he stated happily. "Just cut out any embarrassing parts," he quickly added. From the hug, his mother giggled. "Can't promise that," she said teasingly, drawing a chuckle out of Izuku. After separating, she gave him a proud look. "Now do your best." Izuku nodded as he adjusted his pack. "I will," he said with a smile. Mule. Both Midoriyas looked to their feet and saw Teme looking up to them with a curious expression. Izuku chuckled as he crouched down and rubbed her head. "Thanks, Tem," he grinned as the feline purred from the touch. Afterwards he stood and made his way to the front door, but not before turning around to see his family with a smile. "I'm off," he stated determinedly before leaving. UA Stadium waiting room. "Man," Mina whined as she looked down at her PE uniform with a pout. "I wanted to wear my hero costume," she grumbled before leaning on Izuku's shoulder. Izuku chuckled at her childish attitude. "It's just to keep things fair, Mina," he reminded before a grin formed onto his face. "Besides, I think our uniforms are pretty interesting on their own," he stated, making Mina and everyone else look at him confused. Meanwhile, Bakugo instinctively felt angry for some reason. "Why is it interesting?" Mina couldn't help but ask, voicing out everyone else's curiosity. The response made Izuku's grin widened. "Because I don't see a single price tag on them," he shrugged as he looked away from Mina, who noticed something in his tone that made her think. Meanwhile, everyone else was more than confused at this point, well, except for Todoroki, who appeared to be in his own world. Bakugo was getting angrier, and he himself didn't know why. The gears in Mina's head went to work as she hummed in thought, trying to figure out what message her boyfriend is trying to send. The big grin, the tone in his voice, and the sudden interest in price tags. Mina's eyes widened as she figured out what he was trying to do and glanced at Izuku with a sly expression. "Please," she stated. "You'll never find a tag on anyone's uniforms," she pointed to herself. "Especially mine," she finished with a tone of her own that Izuku picked up. Meanwhile, everyone was curious as to what she meant. Oh. Why's that?" Izuku lightly snickered as he kept his composure. Mina struggled to contain her own laughter, but she powered though. "Because I'm priceless," they both said at the same time, before laughing together, causing some of their classmates to roll their eyes before going back to their discussions, though they were smiling. While others like Ochako were laughing, clearly enjoying the couple's fun. And just like that, Bakugo sighed as he clenched his fists. "My day is ruined," he growled with clear frustration as his eye twitched. While beside him, Kirishima chuckled a bit as he gave him a pat on the back to help him calm down. "It's too early for this, you normies," Minato thought to himself, as he looked at the still laughing couple with an aura of envy around him. Suddenly the door opened, revealing to be Ida. Everyone get, he stopped himself when he noticed some people were laughing a bit. Did I miss something? He stepped in the room, as he observed the scene in curiosity. Izuku chuckled. Nothing much, just some comedy gold buddy, he said with a grin while he was holding on to Mina, who was recovering from her laughter. I see, Ida replied with a smile, knowing his friend's tendency to lighten the mood or to make jokes for the fun of it. So what's up? Izuku asked as he stood up while Mina recovered and fixed her posture. Ida cleared his throat as he gained a serious expression. As I was saying, he started again. We only have a few minutes before we're called. So we have to be ready. He finished as he took a seat to calm his nerves. Everyone else decided to do their own thing in the meantime. Midoriya, came the stoic voice of Todoroki. Izuku turned to face him. Yeah? He raised an eyebrow. Todoroki stared at him before speaking. There's no denying that you're strong, he stoically admitted, making Izuku even more confused. But even if that's the case, I will beat you, he said in his same tone, but Izuku could tell there was something there. Needless to say, everyone else turned to Todoroki's declaration. Before Izuku could respond, Todoroki continued. I don't care if All Might has his eye on you, the OFA user internally tensed. I'm not here to pry on that, but regardless the results will stay the same, he finished with his expression unchanging. While Izuku was thinking of a way to respond to such a declaration, Kirishima quickly stood up and placed a hand on Todoroki's shoulder. Oi, why are you picking a fight all of a sudden? He asked in worry. Mina joined in and stood beside Izuku with a frown. Yeah, what's the big idea? Todoroki pulled his shoulder away from Kirishima's hand. We're not here to play friends, he replied with a hint of annoyance in his voice as he turned away from the couple. So why does it matter? He finished coldly. While Bakugo was getting angry for different reasons this time, Izuku spoke. Fine, he agreed, gaining everyone's attention. I accept your declaration of war, he declared with a serious expression. Todoroki turned around to face Izuku again, while the others were shocked to hear him accept the challenge. Not waiting for a response, Izuku continued. To be honest, I have no idea what you'll gain from beating me, he admitted with a shrug. But what I do know is that everyone here is aiming for the top. He glanced around the room before looking at Todoroki with a daring grin as he pointed a thumb to himself. And so am I. He then stepped in front of Todoroki, whose expression didn't change. So, with that in mind, he calmly offered a handshake. May the best man win. He wore a sportsmanship-like expression. Todoroki simply stared at the hand before nodding to Izuku and made his way to leave the room, shocking everyone else, as well as wondering what was going on between them. Sheesh, I wonder what pissed off Captain Cold over there, Izuku thought in worry, as he watched the retreating form of Todoroki while putting his hand down. Izu. Turning around, he saw Mina looking at him in worry. Are you all right? Izuku nodded with a smile. Yeah, I'm good, he shrugged. It'll take more than a cold shoulder to dampen my spirit, he pointed out with his usual grin, getting a few awkward chuckles from his classmates. Mina rolled her eyes, but smiled fondly at him. Dork, she gave him a playful punch on the shoulder, drawing out a chuckle from him. After a bit, the class was notified to head to the arena. UA Stadium. Once the students were gathered in the center of the arena, the R-rated hero Midnight made her way to the stage, drawing some perverted looks from some members of the audience, as she took her sweet time just to draw more attention to her, assets, as well adding a few extra sways to her hips. Damn, Kaminari muttered to himself with a perverted grin while wiping off a bit of drool. Beside him, Minato was also drooling like crazy until he noticed something odd. Turning his head, he noticed Izuku looking bored. "Midoriya?" Minato called out, gaining his attention. "You all right?" he asked in a way that seemed like he was very sick. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Yeah," he slowly nodded before tilting his head a bit in curiosity. "Why do you ask?" He idly wondered if he looked wrong. Minato then pointed to Izuku. "Because you're not even reacting to midnight," he declared like he was some sort of heretic. The commotion got some of his classmates' attention. Izuku then glanced at midnight for a bit before looking back to Minato with a shrug. Meh, his causal dismissal earned shocked gasps from Minato and Kaminari. Before they went insane, Izuku continued. "I mean, sure, she's pretty." The two pervs calmed a bit at that. "But I only have one girl in mind," he stated sincerely with a smile. The response got a few approving looks from anyone that overheard him. Damn him, Minato and Kaminari thought with envy. Unknown to them, Mina heard the conversation and felt her heart swell from his words. Before anything else, Midnight cracked her whip. "Quiet!" she yelled, feeling annoyed for some reason. Representing the students is Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A. She declared, while looking to the stunned student. "EA!" Izuku exclaimed with a bit of sweat on his forehead as all eyes turned to him. Ida placed a hand on his shoulder. "Well, you did finish the entrance exam in first place," he reminded as others murmured in agreement. Oh. Izuku stuttered out, suddenly regretting his results. "Well, here goes." He lightly gulped as he tensely made his way to the stage while people made way for him. While he was on the way to the stage, some students from the other classes murmured to themselves. "That's the guy who got first place during the exam. He looks quite plain, he doesn't look much." Their voices of disbelief were heard by the students of 1A. "They have no idea," they thought in unison, as they hid their amused expressions. They learned the hard way that Izuku purposefully looked plain just to catch his opponents off guard. Since then, they made sure to stay alert if ever he becomes their opponent. Although some hoped that never happens. Once on the stage, he stood in front of the microphone, though noticeably a bit nervous. "Well, to be honest, I don't have a fancy speech to give you guys," he confessed with a chuckle as he rubbed the back of his neck, which got a few laughs from everyone. "But I can say this," he added, which got everyone to go silent and give him their full attention. "It doesn't matter what course you're from," he shrugged, getting intrigued looks from everyone. "Because at the end of the day, we all have one goal." He placed his right hand on his chest. "To become heroes," he declared with a big grin on his face. "So expect everyone here to give it their all, as they reach for their hopes and dreams. As we all prove to everyone that we can all become great heroes." His eyes glowed in determination as he added power to his declaration. And not a moment later, the stadium was filled with applause, while the students from other courses formed a sense of respect for him. "Love you, Mom," Izuku quickly added before heading back to his classmates with embarrassed haste. The statement and display got some amused chuckles from the audience while some all weed. "Midoriya residents. That's my boy," Inko shouted from the couch with heavy tears as she held Temi in her arms. The latter mewling in happiness from seeing her owner smile on TV. UA Stadium. Once he reached his class, he was greeted by a hug from Mina. "Nice speech, dude." She loosened her hold to look up to him with a smile. Izuku chuckled as he wrapped his arms around her. "Thanks, but I felt like a nervous wreck," he stated with crooked grin, getting a few laughs from his classmates in return. "Don't sweat it, Deku," Ochiko chimed in. "We'd feel the same way you did." she stated in understanding while others nodded in agreement. Ida then raised his arms. Indeed. I would have been shaky as well, he stated in his usual manner, getting a few laughs from his antics. Izuku separated from Mina and turned to Bakugo expectantly. The latter staring at him blankly for a bit before clicking his tongue and looking away. Would have been better if you said, "I'll be number one," he grunted while Izuku laughed at this, guessing that this would have been what Bakugo would have said in his place. I knew he'd say that, their classmates thought with a sweat drop. Now, let's get started right away, Midnight announced with a bit of pride from the speech earlier. Here's the first game. She finished as the screen behind her started selecting the game. Obstacle race. The screen read. Through a near 4 kilometers course around the stadium, participants can use any means necessary to reach the finish line. The first 42 students to finish the race will participate in the next event. Midnight explained with an eager expression. Before Izuku could join everyone at the starting area, he noticed something about the exit. It looks too narrow for everyone, he hummed as he watched everyone else gather in the tunnel. Then it hit him, with small grin he made his way to the back of the crowd. Everyone was either too busy watching the other students, or too busy forming up in the tunnel to notice him. All except one. Commentator box. While present MIC was busy giving an entertaining commentary, Aizawa had his eyes locked onto a particular student. Due to his hero career, his experience allowed him to analyze every detail in a situation and to make sure nothing goes unnoticed under his gaze. Plus his quirk relied on locking onto targets. So needless to say, the moment he saw one of the students start heading behind the crowd, he immediately started analyzing the situation. Why would a student head to the back of the crowd? Did they have no plans of finishing the race? All those thoughts were gone when he saw who it was. He wasn't even surprised to see Izuku do something strange or surprising. Admittedly, he also found it impressive how the teen flowed through the crowd with ease. It honestly reminded him a little bit of himself when he would chase criminals through crowded areas. What are you up to, kid? He thought in intrigue as he eyed Izuku's every movement. The latter's quirk was one of the things he's been trying to figure out. He understood that his abilities centered around bones. But what he wanted to focus on was how he kept on appearing in unexpected places. Back to Izuku. Here should be good, Izuku thought to himself, as he stood by a corner behind the large mob of students. After looking around for a bit, he grinned as he brought right hand up, his fingers set for snapping. On your marks, Midnight announced as the crowd cheered while the students were getting ready. Get set. She paused for effect, while the students braced themselves as Izuku's eyes started glowing. Go! She roared before cracking her whip in the air. The students started pushing themselves through the tunnel, and due to the amount of people, they felt like sardines being crammed into a can. Some even started bumping into each other, causing a few screams of pain. And amongst the chaos, no one noticed the brief flash of green after the race started. Outside the tunnel, Todoroki was going in full sprint. His plan to freeze the tunnel was a partial success. Originally it was supposed to trap everyone, giving him a massive opening to enter first place. However, what he didn't expect was his fellow classmates to be more than prepared for such tactic. Following behind them were fellow students from other courses. Naive Todoroki! Momo yelled as she used her creation quirk to make a metal pole to vault over the ice. Come back here! Bakugo roared in the air as he positioned his palms behind him. You half and half bastard! He ordered before blasting himself forward again. Todoroki glanced behind him with a stoic position. More people from outside of Class 1A were able to dodge that than expected. He mentally grimaced at the partial success of his plan, but nevertheless, it still worked in his favor since he still had the lead on everyone. ZWOOOOSSHHH. Though surprised, Todoroki snapped his head to look in front of him, only to stop as he stared at the scene before him in disbelief, while the students behind him also stopped as they looked to the scene in shock. In front of them were several of the 0-pointers from the entrance exam, but that wasn't the only thing they noticed. The Goliath in the middle stood unresponsive, as it sported a massive hole in the chest that sparked and smoked from the massive damage it had sustained. Beside it, fellow robots focused on something on the ground, causing the students to follow their line of sight and look down as well. What they saw was another surprise. Standing there with his back turned to them was Izuku, his hands in his pockets, as he appeared to be eyeing at his handiwork. How? Todoroki's usually stoic expression faltered into one of disbelief as he stared at the teen. Even with great speed, there was no way Izuku should have been able to break through his ice obstacle. And as if he heard him, Izuku looked over his shoulder with a grin. "Heya," he casually greeted. "Nice of you to drop by," he joked with a chuckle. How did he get there? Was the collective thought of the students outside of 1A, wondering how he passed through the frozen entrance easily, while his fellow classmates were both surprised and unsurprised at his sudden appearance. Commentator box. What? Present MIC shouted in disbelief as he shot up from his seat. How did he get there? He finished with his mouth gaping like a fish. Meanwhile, Aizawa hid a small smile underneath his bandages. So that's how he does it, he thought as he figured out Izuku's teleportation ability. He honestly felt like he managed to solve the greatest mystery in the world, though luckily for the teen, he planned on keeping this secret to himself. From what he's gathered, Izuku uses this ability to catch his opponents off guard, so there wouldn't be any surprise anymore if everyone knew of this ability. He also silently thanked the heavens that the villains didn't possess this ability. Realizing that he hasn't spoken, Aizawa answered his co-announcer's question. He used his quirk, he flatly stated. Present MIC deadpanned at him before going back to his usual commentary. Back with the students. The students were shocked, but quickly shook it off, as they noticed the other 0-pointers focusing on them now. Targets locked. The giants announced in unison, as they raised their arms to attack. Snapping out of his shock, Todoroki ran in front of Izuku, and used his quirk to form a huge wave of ice, encasing and destroying the bots in the process. Whoa, Izuku said in amazement, as he and everyone else stared at the frozen bots in awe. Seeing his chance, Todoroki began sprinting again, but not before glancing back. I wouldn't be comfortable if I were you, he warned before focusing on his run. As if on cue, the frozen Goliaths began collapsing. Fortunately, the robot's fall was slow enough to give everyone time to avoid the crumbling Goliaths. Crash! Did someone yell timber? Izuku thought as he was enveloped by cold mist from the fallen bots. While everyone around him remained in disarray from the crashing bots, he used the cover and the distraction to raise his right hand again with a glow in his eyes. Commentator box. Amazing. Present MIC yelled as he turned to his co-announcer in amazement. Aizawa with his usual tone replied. His actions are logical and strategic, he pointed out. With approval, although he noticed Izuku not among the crowd and immediately looked to the next obstacle to confirm his suspicions. A smirk formed on his face when he did. The fall obstacle. A part of Todoroki was wondering if he was losing it. In front of him was a huge chasm with dozens of pillars of rock with tight ropes attached to them. But that wasn't the issue, the problem was that Izuku was there. The gears in his head went into overdrive as he tried to process how exactly the OFA user ended up ahead of him again. In the meantime, Izuku was admiring the obstacle, trying to figure out how they even built it. He then glanced at Todoroki with a grin. Quite the cliffhanger, ain't it? he said, chortled. Todoroki narrowed his eyes and internally growled, he can't think about Izuku's quirk right now. He was here for one thing only. And with that thought, he used his ice quirk to slide across the ropes, progressing through the obstacle with ease. Izuku sighed as he watched his classmate go over the obstacle. He truly wanted to figure out what was wrong with him. Call it instincts, but something didn't feel right about his classmate. Boom, boom, boom. His thoughts were interrupted by familiar explosions accompanied with screaming. Looking up, he saw Bakugo passing him while cursing at Todoroki. With a small chuckle, Izuku glanced back to see his classmates catching up, followed by other students. Welp, he shrugged before facing forward. Better get going. His eyes glowed as he snapped his fingers to form a medium gaster blaster for him to ride. After mounting the weapon, he flew over the obstacle and made his way to the next challenge. While behind him, those who were unfamiliar with his quirk felt their jaws drop as they came to a halt, much to the amusement of Izuku's classmates, as they passed the stunned students and faced the obstacle. Commentator box. Present MIC was currently rubbing his temples as he tried to figure out how Izuku arrived first to the chasm obstacle. While beside him, Aizawa sat rather smug in his bandages, enjoying his co-announcer's suffering. Minefield obstacle. Reaching the scene, Izuku saw Todoroki and Bakugo sabotaging each other while evading the mines. Seeing his chance, he charged 10% and jumped off his blaster and over the minefield. The duo below immediately noticed a shadow fly over them, which prompted them to look up. Their eyes widened when they saw Izuku soaring through the air with green lightning trailing behind him. Motherfucker! Bakugo roared as he stopped attacking Todoroki and focused on getting first place. Todoroki was of like mind as he froze the mines ahead of him and broke into a sprint, not caring if the frozen mines helped other students. Once on the ground, Izuku rolled before running into full sprint into the tunnel. A smile formed on his face as he caught sight of the finish line at the end. His smile faltered when he heard explosions and ice being formed behind him. So without glancing back, Izuku decided to ease the pressure and sprout bones behind him from random parts in the tunnel. God damn it! He heard Bakugo roar with louder explosions. Izuku snickered before pushing ahead, where he was met with blinding light accompanied by the cheers of the audience. UA Stadium. First place goes to Izuku Midoriya. Present MIC's voice roared throughout the stadium. While catching his breath, Izuku looked to the crowd before his eyes landed on All Might, who was giving him a thumbs up and a proud look. Mom must be crying by now, he thought with a fond smile as he turned back to the tunnel to see Todoroki come out, followed by Bakugo. Good race, you guys, Izuku said with a smile as he approached them. Todoroki just stared at him before walking away, much to Izuku's worry. Fortunately, Bakugo was more vocal with his response. Fuck off, he started with a growl. If Icy Hot wasn't there, I would have taken the top spot. He finished in frustration. Izuku shrugged. Maybe, he grinned, getting a scoff with no real heat from the explosive teen. A few moments later, the duo was approached by the rest of their friends. Izuku noticed Mina running at him in full speed. With a smile on his face, he spread his arms out and braced himself for impact. Noticing this, Mina sped up and leapt into Izuku's arms, giggling as she was spun around for a bit before stopping. From her embrace, she looked up with a smile. That was amazing. She cheered before separating from his embrace. How did you get ahead of everyone? She asked with a curious look as Ochako and Ida joined them. Izuku hummed in thought before grinning. I just used a shortcut. He shrugged as Ida and Ochako deadpanned at him while Mina pouted. Beside them, Bakugo was thinking of ways to kick Izuku's and Todoroki's ass in the next game. Midnight then cracked her whip, getting everyone's attention. The top 42 shall move on to the next round. The next event shall be. She trailed off as the screen behind her started choosing the event. Cavalry battle. The giant screen read. Participants will form teams with maximum of 4 members. The objective is to swipe headbands from other teams while protecting your own. The value is determined by your placement during the last competition. Izuku began sweating a bit at the implications after noting the last sentence. Which gives first place the value of 10 million points. Midnight ended with a sadistic smile. With the final nail to the coffin, all students turned to him with killer intent. Including most of his classmates. So this is how All Might feels when villains target him, Izuku thought, as he looked around with a nervous expression. Fortunately Mina saw this and held his hand to calm him down. Izuku snapped out of his panic and turned to her with a grateful smile, getting one in return. Midnight then continued explaining the rules. The one to wear the headband shall be the rider. Should you lose all your headbands, you may still try to steal other headbands before the time is up. Everyone is allowed to use their quirks, but if used to purposefully harm other participants, they'll be immediately disqualified, she finished with seriousness. TCH, Bakugo exclaimed as he looked away in disappointment, causing his classmates to deadpan at him. Midnight then raised her whip. You have 15 minutes to form your teams. Good luck. She finished in excitement as she cracked her whip. Glancing around, Izuku saw everyone keeping their distance from him and formed their own teams. He also noticed Bakugo and Todoroki already completing their team formations. Welp, that makes sense, Izuku thought with a sigh as he looked around. With a big target on my back, nobody would want to be a part of my team, he finished as he turned around to see Mina and Ochako looking at him with smiles. What are you guys doing? He asked with a head tilt. Mina narrowed her eyes while she placing her hands on her hips. Well duh. Teaming up with you of course, she stated with a grin like it's the most obvious thing in the world. Ochako nodded with enthusiasm. Yeah. We've got your back, Deku. She cheered with excitement. Besides, Mina said in a sly tone as she stepped closer to him. You didn't think I'd leave you alone, did you? She finished with a mischievous grin while playfully poking his chest. Nope, Izuku chuckled as he gave Mina a quick kiss on the lips. The latter giggling with a blush as she covered her mouth while he looked away and rubbed the back of his head with an embarrassed grin. Ahem. Snapping out of their interaction, the couple turned to face Ochako, who had a teasing smirk. Maybe save the romance after the battle. She playfully suggested. Oh right, Izuku said with a sheepish expression, as he and Mina separated with blushes on their faces, much to Ochako's amusement. Izuku then began looking for the final member of their team until his eyes landed on Ida. And with a smile on his face, he approached the taller teen. Hey Ida, wanna team up? Ida turned to Izuku with an apologetic expression. As much as I want to, he started, getting some confused looks from the three. I actually plan on testing myself against you, he then gave a small bow. I'm sorry, but it's something I wanted to do, he finished apologetically. Izuku was stunned for a bit before chuckling, making the representative look up. It's fine dude, he shrugged as Ida straightened himself out. Good luck out there died, he grinned as he offered a handshake. Ida smiled and shook his hand. And to you as well my friend, he stated with a nod before joining Todoroki's team, much to the three's surprise. Izuku then turned to his teammates, who seemed a bit down from Ida's choice of teammates. It's fine guys, he gained their attention. Everyone here wants to show the world that they can be heroes. So I get why he wants to test himself, he stated in understanding which got nods of agreement in return. With Ida out of the option, Izuku began looking for a teammate once again. The rules didn't exactly limit them to only working with their classmates, which meant finding at least one more member would be. Mr. First place, team up with me. Turning to the voice, the three saw a girl with pink hair, yellow eyes, goggles and a bag full of gadgets approaching them. And from what Izuku could tell, she wasn't going to stop until she was in his personal space. I'm Hatsume Mai. I'm from the support course. Given your position, you'll be underneath the spotlight, right? Then that means companies will get a good look at my baby's dash. She wasn't able to complete her sentence and breach his personal space, as she suddenly found herself covered in a green glow and lifted a bit from the ground. Looking ahead, she saw Izuku, with a hand stretched out, with his eyes shining a bit, while Ochako and Mina were just stunned from the girl's sudden appearance, before snapping out of it and stood beside him while keeping an eye on Mai. Whoa, easy there, lady, Izuku chuckled as a grin formed on his face. I'm not planning on becoming a teenage father, he finished with a laugh, resulting in an embarrassed expression from Mai, obviously referring to the term babies. While Ochako rolled her eyes at the immature joke with a smile as Mina quickly placed both hands on her mouth to try and hold in her laughter. Izuku then cleared his throat, getting their attention. Now, I'm going to put you down, he then held up a finger. But I need you to calm down and explain why we'll benefit from you being in our team, he suggested calmly while his teammates nodded. Though still surprised from her current position, Mai gave a nod which resulted in her being gently placed back on her feet. She then composed herself as she held out her bag. My inventions here are just what you need to win the game. She pulled out a jetpack. For instance, this jetpack here will offer high mobility and help avoid obstacles along the way, she said with pride. Izuku placed a hand on his chin with a thoughtful hum. Pairing this with Ochako's quirk will let us fly away with no problem. Plus those hover boots could be useful as well. Mina's acid can also serve to destroy any blockade that might be in the way. Plus there's my quirk in the mix. After nodding to himself, he turned to Mai, offering a handshake. Welcome aboard, he welcomed with a smile. Mai sprang to life as she grabbed Izuku's hand and shook it with vigor. You won't be disappointed, she stated happily, getting amused smiles from the three. Time's up, Midnight announced to everyone. With that, Izuku wrapped his headband and positioned himself as the rider of the group. Ochako was on his right, Mina was on his left and Mai was in front. Once set, he looked down to his teammates. Ready? He asked with an excited grin. As ready as I'll ever be, Mina responded with a grin of her own. Same here, Ochako said in excitement. Affirmative, Mai confirmed with much enthusiasm as she wore her goggles. Izuku then looked to the other teams with his eyes glowing. Then let's get to it, right? They all replied. On the stage, Midnight licked her lips as she lifted her whip in the air, before bringing it down with a loud snap. Begin? Cavalry event. Unsurprisingly, most teams rushed towards Izuku's team, while others went to collect their points elsewhere. But the most notable were the teams of Bakugo and Todoroki's team. Bakugo was being carried by Kirishima, while Shiro and Tokoyami were on his sides. Todoroki was being carried by Ida, Momo to his left and Denki to his right. Good combinations, Izuku thought as his team braced themselves for the assault from other teams. As if on cue, a team from 1B students came close. The student in the front with no lips used his quirk to make the ground around them sand. We're sinking, Mina shouted in worry. Look away from the thrusters, Izuku screamed as he prepared to activate the jetpack. Mina and Ochako immediately looked away from the jetpack as it lit up, but not before the latter used her quirk on her team. With the combination of her quirk, the team easily escaped the quicksand as they took flight. From below, the teams looked up in surprise as they watched the team blast off. Toru from below saw an opportunity and turned to Jiro, who was on her right. "Jiro!" she shouted. "I know." Jiro responded without delay and sent her earphone jacks towards Izuku. The latter sensing their approach and formed a bone club before throwing it at them. Clang! With a hiss, Jiro retracted her jacks. "Damn!" she cursed as eyed her stinging quirk with a grimace. Thanks to Hatsume's hover boots, the team was able to make a soft landing. "Thanks for the awesome gear, Hatsume." Izuku thanked sincerely as his team started moving again. "My felt pride from those words. I'm glad you like them. And please, call me Mai," she encouraged while giving Izuku a big smile. His response was nodding while mirroring her expression, oblivious to the shocked expressions of Mina and Ochako from how effortlessly he befriended the young inventor. Before he could say anything, Izuku instinctively activated his psychokinesis and stopped a projectile from hitting Ochako's foot. The other three turned to look at the projectile in surprise. "Minata's quirk," Ochako blurted out in surprise as they eyed the sticky orb. But where Izuku's question was cut off when he spotted Shoji charging at them. On his back appeared to be a tent formed from his quirk. And from the front of the entrance, Mineta peeked from within, looking quite creepy. "Don't even think about underestimating me, Midoriya," he declared in a tone that made his team shiver. "Is that even allowed?" Izuku asked aloud. "It is," Midnight clarified. With a creepy laugh, Mineta retreated to the darkness, and suddenly a tongue lashed out and tried to grab Izuku's headband. "What the?" Despite his surprise, his senses and reflexes allowed him to easily avoid the tongue as it retreated back into the tent. "As expected from you, Izuku," Tsuyu said as she peeked through the opening, before hiding herself again. After a second, her tongue came lashing out again, accompanied by Mineta's quirk. "Incoming!" Izuku exclaimed as his eyes glowed while using his psychokinesis to stop the tongue and some of Mineta's quirk. But unfortunately, there was still more of the grape-themed teen's quirk on the way. "Mina." "Got it," Mina replied before throwing her acid to intercept the orbs, which immediately dissolved upon contact and splashed on the ground. After breathing a sigh of relief, Izuku sent the tongue back to Tsuyu, who was surprised by the amount of force it had in return and was knocked back within the tent. And at the same time, he sent Mineta's own quirk towards Shoji as well, resulting in the multi-armed teen to tumble from the contact as he didn't have Mineta's immunity to them. Izuku then turned to his team, snapping them out of their amazement. "Let's get out of here." He prepared to activate the jetpack, as the three nodded in agreement before they launched themselves in the air again. But they were in the air, they heard explosions from below them. Boom boom. Ochako squeaked in surprise when Bakugo had launched himself in the air and appeared right in front of them. "Don't get carried away," he shouted as he prepared to use his explosion on them. Izuku retaliated by summoning a top half of a medium blaster to act as a shield. Boom! "TCH!" Bakugo exclaimed in frustration before he was pulled back to his team while Izuku's team safely landed with great distance from his fellow classmates. Talk about Rocket Man, he thought as he stared at Bakugo's team, who focused on fighting other teams who surrounded them. Well, if it isn't one as famous comedian. His team turned to the voice, revealing to be another blonde-haired boy. Though there was something about his expression that made Izuku slightly annoyed for some reason. "Who are you?" Izuku asked in confusion while his teammates looked at them curiously. The teen's expression became a bit annoyed from the question, but cleared his throat nonetheless. "My name is Minato from Class 1B, he stated carkily, while his teammates either rolled their eyes or grumbled and muttered something under their breath. Izuku stated simply before looking down to his team, then back to Monoma. Well, it was nice meeting you, but we gotta go, he stated nonchalantly while his teammates were shocked but complied anyway as they began moving away from the other team, who were gaping at them. Monoma felt his blood boil as he gestured his team to charge towards Izuku. "What's wrong, Midoriya? Can't deal with us?" he said in a dangerous tone that made his own team nervous. What they didn't know was that Izuku wanted them to attack. And as they followed, they failed to notice a certain explosive blonde eyeing at them with a feral look on his face. While around his team, the students that had tried to surround them retreated from either being overwhelmed or losing their headbands. Boom! Sick boy, Izuku chuckled that made his teammates look at him curiously. "Hey fuckers!" Monoma's team turned to see Bakugo in the air. "What the foo dash," was the only thing Monoma got out, before his team was mercilessly attacked by Bakugo. All the while, Izuku was laughing and joined in by his teammates, as they were merrily making their getaway. Author's note: for Bakugo versus Monoma, it flowed the same way. Once their laughter died down, Ochako spoke. "That was amazing, Deku." She cheered, getting chuckle out of him. "But how did you know Bakugo would help us?" she asked in curiosity, while the other two looked to him for an explanation. Izuku grinned. "I didn't." They were taken aback by his response. "To be honest, I was about to trap them in a rib cage, bone cage, until Bakugo showed up," he ended with a laugh while his teammates remained shocked. "So we got lucky." The Mina and Ochako thought before deadpanning at Izuku, as he laughed, whereas Mai redirected her focus on monitoring her babies. They were snapped out of it when a wall of ice formed in front of them. Looking to where it came from, they saw Todoroki's team looking at them with serious expressions. "Welp, at least I know I have his attention," Izuku mused as he subtly glanced at the timer. "Won't be long until time is up," he powered up as he stared back at the other team. "Ida forward," Todoroki ordered before turning to Momo Yaoirozu, "prepare to guard us and conduct electricity." Both did as they're told and followed accordingly. Todoroki snapped to Kaminari, but the electric user was one step ahead as he began charging up. In the meantime, other teams were converging on their position, unaware of what his team was doing. Izuku, however, saw their plan, as his eyes widened in realization. "Oh no, you don't." He instantly activated the jetpack and began to take flight. Luckily, his teammates caught on as well, as they held onto him. Not a second later, Kaminari unleashed his quirk and effectively stunned the other teams. He figured it out, Todoroki thought in frustration, as he watched Izuku land a safer distance away from him. Upon landing, Izuku's pack immediately started sparking up, causing the girls to gasp as they eyed the support item. Did it overload? He quickly took off the pack and handed it to Hatsume, who immediately began to inspect it. The inventor grimaced after a bit and deactivated the gadget before handing it back to Izuku. "Sadly, yes," Hatsume confirmed with an apologetic and frustrated look. After wearing the deactivated gadget again, Izuku gave her an encouraging smile. "It's fine, it just means there's more room for improvement," he said with a grin before looking ahead for more teams. Not noticing the shocked expression from Mai. They were then surprised when they found themselves surrounded by walls of ice. Looking ahead, he saw Todoroki's team waiting to attack. But during their stare down, Izuku noticed a few things. Todoroki hasn't used his left side, meaning that staying there is the safest place. Kaminari appeared to be running out of juice, and from what he can see, Ida looked like he was preparing something. "Everyone, there's not much time before the match ends. You won't be able to use me after this," the latter warned, getting confused looks from everyone. Izuku remained silent as he watched his friend closely. Ida then went into a running stance, and it's at that moment Izuku realized what he was doing. Talk over. Ida called out, getting Todoroki and his teammates to hold on tight. Recipro dash. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Izuku blurted out, making Ida stop and look at him warily. Izuku grinned as his eyes glowed. You wouldn't want to run into a dead end, would you? He snapped his fingers, causing 3 bone fences to sprout from the ground and surround his team, effectively preventing Ida from using his special ability entirely. Now Todoroki was more than frustrated at this point. Izuku's defenses were perfect against Ida's speed. He could send an ice wall, but Izuku's quirk and Mina's quirk could counter that. And even without Mina, the OFA user's quirk was just as strong. He had a good view of its capabilities during the obstacle race. Izuku saw the frustration in Todoroki's eyes. It was clear that he wanted to attack, but his own quirk must be complicating the issue. Taking a sneaky glance at the clock again, he noticed that the timer was almost up. Deciding to add to the pressure, he chuckled. You look frustrated about something, buddy, Izuku called out with a smug grin that made Todoroki's blood boil. Meanwhile, everyone else turned to him in shock, not expecting a taunt from the teen. Boom crash. Snapping to the source of the commotion, they saw Bakugu's team break through the ice wall and was now targeting Izuku as well. The explosive teen's expression looked like those of a killer. Hand it over, Deku, he ordered with pure venom in his voice that made his own teammates nervous. What do we do, Izu? Mina asked in worry as she noted that they were effectively cornered while his other teammates were worried as well, considering that there was only so much bone fences could do. Izuku looked between the two teams. Both can be difficult to battle at the same time, considering the combinations they have. And another factor he also had to consider would be the remaining match time. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Izuku then grinned. Simple, he stated, getting everyone's attention. I'm going to use my special attack, he stated calmly, with a shrug, causing both Todoroki and Bakugu's teammates to become nervous from his declaration, while their riders just steeled themselves. Mina looked at him in curiosity, before she remembered the battle trials, causing an evil smirk to form on her face as she turned to the other teams. Ochako and Mai didn't know what the special attack was, but decided to play along and formed serious expressions. If this was Izuku's plan, then they'll trust it. Unfortunately, Ida also remembered the battle trial and alerted everyone. He's bluffing. He just wants to stall time. His statement calmed everyone else a bit, while Mina felt a little nervous, but didn't show it. Izuku decided to have them second-guessing. I? He challenged with a raised eyebrow. Ida's resolve faltered a bit as he responded. Why, you never used your cannons during the battle trials, and I believe you wouldn't use them now, he accused semi-confidently. Kaminari jumped in. Why, yeah. He voiced his agreement. Midnight even said that hurting students on purpose is against the rules, so there's no way you'll do it. He then looked to Izuku for assurance. All right. He gulped. Izuku didn't even give a verbal response, as his eyes glowed and snapped his fingers. From behind his team, 2 large Gaster blasters appeared, causing Mina's expression to become wicked to add to the pressure. By this time, Mai and Ochako now understood the plan and mimicked Mina's expression. Though Mai was also thinking of making similar weapons for the heroes. Upon seeing the cannons, Bakugu and Todoroki were surprised but didn't show it. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for their teammates, as their colors drained. Anyone else that saw the cannons was shocked by the size and the firepower that they must possess. Midoriya. Momo managed to say, feeling faint as she nervously stared between him and the 2 cannons. With a bit of sweat, Kirishima glanced at Bakugu. He wouldn't do it right. He asked his rider for some semblance of assurance, while his teammates also glanced at the teen with hope. But to their dismay, the cannons hovered to the sides of Izuku's team and picked their targets. The one on the left aimed for Todoroki's team, while the right one aimed for Bakugu's team. Both weapons staring with intensity as they growled. Izuku noticed Bakugu and Todoroki were keeping their composure, so he decided to add one last detail. His eyes flared up as green spheres formed in the blasters, growling as they began charging, resulting in both teams to be under the light of the blasters. That did it, both riders were now shocked. He might, Bakugu said in a serious tone, as he prepared to fight Izuku. The response made his teammates go white. While Todoroki looked genuinely surprised, sure victory was important. But was it really worth hurting your friends for it? He was so stunned that he didn't notice a familiar feeling start to emerge from his left side. And just for good measure, Izuku channeled 10%, causing green sparks to emanate from his body, which successfully added more pressure into his classmates. Nobody moved, nobody dared to breathe as the energy from the cannons intensified by the second. The match is over. Present MIC yelled, startling the two other teams. Team Midoriya retains first place. His declaration filled the stadium with the cheers from the crowd. Author's note, the other teams that won are the same as Canon. And just like that, Izuku powered down and collapsed on his teammates, resulting in a pile of laughing teens as the blasters, along with the energy, despawned. Meanwhile, Bakugu's teammates all breathed a sigh of relief and grouped up with Izuku. However, Todoroki just stood there, staring at his left hand in disbelief, as his teammates approached Izuku. He made me use my left. He clenched his left fist before directing a calculative gaze at Izuku, who was laughing with the others. That was awesome! Ochiko exclaimed as she jumped up and down. Momo giggled at her before turning her attention to Izuku. Still, I didn't think that you of all people would use intimidation, she said in a semi-stern tone. Ida nodded in agreement. Indeed. You've clearly showed us that we have a long way to go. He stated proudly while chopping his arms in the air, getting a few laughs from his classmates. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. Well, it was either that or hurting you guys, he admitted, getting shocked looks from them. Honestly, I'd rather do anything else than that, he stated honestly, getting smiles out of them. Mina decided to have some fun. You should totally have seen your faces though. She laughed, getting some embarrassed expressions from them. Hey, Kaminari weakly retorted. Anyone would freak out if they saw Midoriya's blasters aimed at them, he pointed out while pointing at Izuku, who looked a bit guilty. Kirishima noticed this and wrapped an arm around him. Hey, don't sweat it bro, he started with a toothy grin. There's no hard feelings here, he looked to everyone else. Right guys? Momo then gasped as she placed a hand over her mouth. Oh heavens no. She gave Izuku an understanding smile. It was just a competition, there's no personal grudges here, she stated in understanding. Here. Ida declared in agreement, as everyone else voiced the same sentiments, which made Izuku feel much better. Besides, Kirishima quickly added, making Izuku look at him curiously. I think it was pretty manly, he said before giving the OFA user a friendly noogie, eliciting laughter from him which was shared with everybody else. Their laughter died down when Bakugu approached Izuku, with a fist raised to him while wearing a smirk. Kirishima understood immediately, and let Izuku go to let them have their manly exchange. With a grin on his face, Izuku returned the fist bump. Had fun? Bakugu chuckled evilly as he cracked his knuckles. Hell yes, he said with a crazed smile that got a laugh from Izuku. While the rest just sweat dropped at the interaction, they honestly wondered sometimes how a cinnamon roll became friends with an angry teen like Bakugu. Izuku ceased his laughter before his eyes landed on Mai, who was doing repairs on her jetpack. With a smile, he made his way to the inventor while his friends were confused from his sudden departure. "The fuck is he doing?" Bakugo asked as he turned to Mina. Mina looked at Izuku and followed his gaze. When she realized what he was doing, a warm smile formed on her face. Being himself, she stated fondly while the rest just observed. "Hey Mai." Izuku called the inventor, getting her attention. Mai turned with a surprised expression. "Oh, Mr. First Place." She replied back with a smile, getting a laugh out of Izuku. Izuku waved a hand. "Just Midoriya or Izuku is fine," he stated before offering a handshake. "I just wanted to say thanks for letting us use your inventions," he stated with a smile. Mai was shocked for a bit before returning the handshake with a smile. "Well, I'm glad you like them." She then looked to the damaged jetpack with a frown. "Before they went wrong, I mean," she finished with guilt before letting go of Izuku's hand. Izuku placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, it's fine," he said, getting Mai's attention. "A few mishaps here and there just means that there's more room to improve," he advised with an understanding smile, getting a thoughtful impression from Mai in return. Izuku continued. "I'm sure you'll be a great inventor," he finished sincerely. Mai snapped to Izuku in shock before nodding with a big smile. "You're right." Her eyes lit up with possibilities. "This is nothing but a minor setback," she declared determinedly with a triumphant laugh. "Glad to hear it," Izuku laughed along before gesturing a thumb to his classmates. "Well, I gotta get going now. Nice to meeting you, Mai." "Likewise," she replied with equal gusto. Izuku waved her goodbye before heading back to his classmates. ONLT to stop in front of them when he noticed that they had amused expressions on their faces. Well, except for Bakugo, who looked bored. "What?" he asked with a head tilt. Mina giggled at his confusion and gave him a hug. "Nothing much," she giggled. "You're just too sweet sometimes," she ended with a grin. Having an idea what she meant, Izuku chuckled and wrapped his arms around Mina. "I do get that a lot," he stated with a small laugh. Ignoring his envy, Kaminari shook his head with a sigh. "It's weird how a pure guy like you has a scary quirk," he stated while scratching his head. Zero voiced his agreement. "I hear that," he admitted with his usual expression. "It's honestly easy to forget you have that quirk in the first place," he admitted while others nodded in agreement. Separating from Mina, Izuku shrugged. "I do try to go unnoticed," he stated simply while Mina nodded. "We'll be taking a short break," Midnight announced over the microphone. After looking at Midnight, Izuku turned to his classmates. "Welp, looks like it's time to get some grub," he patted his stomach. "Fucking finally!" Bakugo roared, startling everyone. "I'm starved," he complained with a scowl while his classmates just deadpanned at him. "Is he angry about everything?" His classmates thought in unison with a sweat drop. As Izuku followed his classmates, he was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. With an eyebrow raised, he turned to see Todoroki, with a stoic expression. Noticing this, his classmates stopped moving as well. "I need to speak to you," the bicolored teen looked at everyone else. In private, his tone had no room for argument. Bakugo stepped forward with a scowl. "Like hell he'll go alone," he threatened with a growl and a few mini explosions from his palms. And before anyone could say anything, Izuku raised his hand. "It's fine, you guys." Bakugo looked like he wanted to say more, but backed off and joined the rest of the group. Izuku then turned to Todoroki, who gestured to follow him. "Hey," turning around he saw Mina looking at him worriedly. "Be careful, all right?" Izuku nodded before cupping her cheek. "I will," he said with a smile, before letting go and following Todoroki. Mina watched him go with a worried frown before reluctantly regrouping with everyone else. Isolated area by the stadium. The two teens stared at each other with serious expressions. Izuku knew this was something serious, so he waited patiently. He then felt a very familiar presence nearby, but decided to not say anything about it, lest he might risk not knowing anything from Todoroki. "I was overpowered," Todoroki suddenly said, making Izuku look at him curiously. "So much that I broke my pledge." His tone had some frustration in it. Izuku found himself glancing at Todoroki's left hand. He had assumed that Todoroki never used it much, because he preferred to use his ice quirk more. But it was clear that it was much deeper than that. Taking the silence as permission, Todoroki continued. "None of them feel it." Izuku snapped out his thoughts and looked at him. "The way you smile, how you overwhelm your opponents with your quirk, and how your laughter puts everyone at ease." He then paused as he eyed Izuku with an intense stare. "All these things feel similar to All Might." Izuku's eyes widened a bit as he realized what point Todoroki is getting at. Did he figure it out? He was always careful with the way he explained his quirk and made sure to keep similarities between him and All Might to a minimum. So how did Todoroki figure it out? Before he could say anything, Todoroki spoke again. "Midoriya, are you?" He trailed off as if trying to phrase it the best way he can. Meanwhile, a part of Izuku wanted to knock him out and bring him to All Might, but decided to deal with what came next. And while he was at it, he considered knocking out the familiar presence as well. All Might's secret love child or something? Todoroki bluntly asked in a serious tone. What? Izuku can swear he heard a record scratch after that statement. Secret love child. He felt his eyeballs about to pop out of his skull from the shock of it. Well? Todoroki prodded with a bit of impatience. Realizing he hadn't said anything, Izuku quickly composed himself. As much as an interesting theory that is, he admitted while rubbing the back of his head. "I'm not his secret love child," he said in embarrassment, while mentally adding that as one of the things that he didn't think he would say in his life. Though admittedly, he did see him as a father figure. "Oh," Todoroki said blankly. "Is that right?" Izuku nodded. "My apologies for the misunderstanding then," he stated with his usual tone, but Izuku could see the shame in his eyes. Recovering from his earlier mistake, Todoroki cleared his throat, snapping Izuku out of his own embarrassment. "But there is something between you two, isn't here?" he asked in seriousness. Izuku just shrugged. "He's my teacher, just as all of us are his students," he simply stated, which technically wasn't a lie. Todoroki seemed satisfied before leaning against the wall with a sigh. "Endeavor's my old man," he confessed with clenched fists, getting a look of surprise from Izuku. "I'm sure you know that he's been stuck as the number 2 hero for forever." He then glared at Izuku, who was surprised from the sudden expression. "If the number 1 hero has his eye on you, then I have more reason to beat you," he declared with a tone of finality. All the while, Izuku was looking at him with caution. Where is he going with this? He thought in worry, not liking the steady increase of tension in the air. Not even bothered with the silence, or how Izuku looked tense, Todoroki continued. "My old man has a strong desire to rise in the world." He then looked outside. As a hero, he won a name for himself with crushing force. And when he couldn't surpass All Might, he moved on to his next plan, he finished. "And that would be?" Izuku warily prodded. From the way his classmate was talking about his father, it sounded like he was talking about a heartless monster. Todoroki then returned his cold gaze to Izuku. "Have you heard of quirk marriages?" he asked with his stoic expression. And just like that, Izuku felt his blood run cold as his eyes widened in disbelief. "Why, you don't mean he It sounded impossible to believe. Todoroki nodded as he closed his eyes. He did, he tiredly admitted, not seeing Izuku looking horrified. The bicolored teen then opened his eyes with rage within them. He's trying to fulfill his own desire by raising me to be a hero to surpass All Might, he confessed with fury while Izuku looked to his feet, trying to digest what he said. The idea of simply raising a child for selfish reasons was sickening enough, but to force other people to have them with you is much worse. In my memories my mother is always crying. Todoroki placed his left hand on his scar, as Izuku tensely looked back at him. She would say my left side was unsightly as she poured boiling water on me, he stated in pain while Izuku felt himself lean back against the wall in shock. He was always loved by his mother, so the idea of a mother saying those things to her own son was heartbreaking. Now you know why I picked a fight with you. Todoroki placed his hand down, while he stared at Izuku with a hardened expression. And why I will never use my left side, he declared in anger. Izuku honestly didn't know what to say, he just went through so much information and emotions in one moment. Sorry for wasting your time, Todoroki suddenly said before walking away. As Izuku watched him leave, he remembered something that All Might once said to him. I can say without a doubt that you will be a great hero. He then clenched his fists and caught up with Todoroki. Todoroki. Todoroki stopped and glanced at Izuku, who wore a frown. I can't even imagine what you've been through. He paused as a serious expression formed onto his face, while Todoroki fully turned to him. But even so, I won't back down. Unbeknownst to him, his eyes started glowing a bit. And as a response to your declaration of war, I'll be fighting you with everything I've got, he stated determinedly. Can you say the same? He questioned with a serious expression. Todoroki stared at him for a bit before turning around and wordlessly walked away, but Izuku saw a glimpse of conflict in his eyes. The latter sighed at this as his eyes powered down. After making sure the coast was clear, Izuku turned back to the tunnel with a serious expression. You can come out now, he called out with an expectant tone. From the corner, Bakugo appeared with a serious expression of his own, as he made his way to Izuku. I'm guessing you heard everything. A nod in response making him sigh. Okay, do us a favor and keep this between the three of us would ya? He requested with a hard look. Bakugo just nodded before looking to where Todoroki was headed with a thoughtful expression. Izuku also stared in silence before sighing. Come on, Bakugo looked to him. Let's get some grub, he suggested with a small smile, getting a grunt in response. As they were heading back, Bakugo glanced at Izuku, gaining his attention. Did he really call you All Might's love child? He stated with a tone of disbelief. Izuku completely stopped, prompting Bakugo to do the same and glanced at him with an eyebrow raised. Is that your way of lightening the mood? He asked as a small smirk formed. Bakugo suddenly looked embarrassed before scowling. Fuck you, he grumbled before marching ahead. With a small smile, Izuku was about to follow, but not before looking back with a determined look. I will save you, he promised before catching up with Bakugo.